Side note for any 911 fanfic readers, I finally read Ice Cream Before Dinner today. Oh my god! Hi, I'm Claudia, and spin-off shows can be kind of hit or miss. Now, when I'm talking about spin-off shows, I mean the ones that they make because like the main show is massively successful and they just basically want to make money off of it. And some of them can be really good. Some of them can become their own shows and like stand on their own. And then there's some spin-off shows that only last one season, and even that feels like it went on for too long. Now, I am someone who watches a lot of TV shows, and a lot of those have spin-off shows that I also watch. So I'm going to take you through all the shows that I watch that have spin-off shows and whether I think those spin-offs are good or bad, or somewhere in the middle, because there are some that are just kind of half decent, you know? And the shows I'm going to be talking about are 911, Criminal Minds, Grey's Anatomy, and the One Chicago Universe. So if you don't want spoilers for any of those, maybe don't watch this video. Now, obviously, as I'm going through all these spin-off shows, I'm going to tell you why I think they either did really well or didn't do as well. Obviously, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. You might love some of these shows, but this is just what I think about them.
Hi, Editing Claudia here. I just want to apologise for the weird lighting issues in this video. Basically, as I was filming this, the sun kept going in and out and I didn't really notice as I was filming. So for some parts of the video, it is a bit darker than normal, but please just ignore it. I promise it will get lighter again. Sorry.
First of all, I'm going to talk about the One Chicago Universe, because these shows feel the least like spin-offs. Obviously, you start with the original show, Chicago Fire, but Chicago PD starts during season 2 of Chicago Fire, so there must have been some kind of plan for PD quite early on in season 1. And like we're introduced to both Voight and Antonio Dawson in like the 3rd episode of season 1 of Fire. Like it's pretty early on. Like it's very early, and Antonio Dawson is related to one of the characters on Chicago Fire. So there had to have been some kind of like vague plan for making a spin-off. Obviously we don't get like a proper introduction to the PD universe until early on in season 2 of Chicago Fire. But I think they probably had plans for PD relatively early on, which makes PD more of a cohesive spin-off, if that makes sense. What I mean is characters have relationships with characters on other shows, they talk to each other, they are seen in other shows. Like Jay Halstead's introduction is actually in Fire, not in PD. Also, if my memory serves me correctly, I do believe Kevin Atwater is in an episode of Chicago Fire like early on in season 2 when they do that like kind of PD introduction. But compared to that backdoor pilot, in the first episode the cast has been completely filled out with more characters than we see in that episode of Fire. If you don't know, backdoor pilot basically means when they introduce a spin-off show on an episode of the main show. That's what that means. I've already mentioned that Jay Halstead was introduced a bit later. He wasn't in that first episode of Fire where they introduced PD. But then when we get to the first episode of PD, the cast has filled out by quite a substantial amount. Adam Ruzek is new, Kim Burgess is new, Sergeant Platt is new, Erin Lindsay's new. Those are the characters we didn't see in that backdoor pilot. But even though those characters were new, they were still very much interconnected with the characters we already knew from Fire. Like how Erin Lindsay dates Kelly Severide for a bit, and how, massive spoilers for PD and Fire, by the way, Olinsky's daughter dies in the big factory fire that they respond to. Obviously, you already have the pre-existing kind of hatred between Matt Casey and Sergeant Voight. They really don't like each other, but they kind of learn to respect each other, I guess. And then also Antonio is Gabby's brother. Jay dates Gabby for a bit during the whole undercover at Molly situation. So because they had plans for PD so early on, they were able to integrate the characters in a way that felt real and natural. And then surprisingly, they also did that very well with Med. Med starts at the same time as season 4 of Chicago Fire and season 3 of Chicago PD. And because it started much later than PD, you can tell it wasn't an originally planned spin-off. Like, obviously they saw the success of Fire and PD and thought we could do a third one about a hospital, you know? And I think you can tell because in the earlier seasons of Fire and PD, they never mention Med as a hospital. When they're like interviewing victims or taking patients to hospital, it's almost always Lakeshore and not Chicago Med. And obviously the only character we get introduced to from Med before Med starting is Will Halstead. He's there for quite a bit before Med starts, and I think even if there hadn't been a Med spin-off, he still would have been there. If you actually rewatch the first episode he's in, they actually do retcon a lot of his backstory. Like in the first episode he's in, he says he's Jay's younger brother, yet in the rest of the show he is Jay's older brother, so I can just assume they retcon that. Also, he was a plastic surgeon in New York and then became a chief resident in an emergency room in Chicago. It just didn't really make sense career-wise, and that's why his like past in plastic surgery is almost like never brought up in Chicago Med. I can't think of one time it is, and if it is, it's probably like a fleeting mention, just because they retconned a lot of Will's backstory, even though his backstory is like a main part of Chicago Fire and Chicago PD. Like there's that episode of PD where Will's pulling bullets out of a guy on a kitchen table. Like, everyone remember that? And that sort of makes sense as him being in emergency medicine, like he would have dealt with quite a few gunshot wounds. But then in Fire, when Gabby has complications from her pregnancy, he's the one who does the surgery. Because even if they were still going with the plastic surgeon backstory, that still wouldn't make sense as to why he was doing that surgery on Gary, because that is not plastics. And I'm saying that completely based on Grey's Anatomy. Please tell me if I'm wrong. And if you don't know, the backdoor pilot for Med is actually the episode of, I believe, Chicago Fire, when there's a bomb in the ED and Will's there and Kelly almost dies. That's the Med backdoor pilot. And if you've watched that episode, you know Will is pretty much the only character who comes back apart from April Saxton. She's also introduced in Chicago Fire before the start of Chicago Med, but in like a much less invasive way than Will is. Like the episodes that Will Holstead is in before the start of Chicago Med are very memorable. Like they're big episodes. Whereas April, not so much. She's just kind of there. Like, it's established that her and Kelly Severide went to high school together and were very close friends. I think they do briefly date for a bit, but then that's pretty much never touched on again. And there are like a couple of moments in Med and Fire where they talk to each other and you can tell that they know each other from before, like the show. But April just kind of doesn't have the same effect on the show that Will has. Like, not only is Will the older brother of one of the other main characters, he's also highly involved with the medical care of several different other main characters before the show even starts. But both of those essentially helped Med feel more ingrained into the One Chicago universe. Like, because characters know each other from prior to like the show starting, it makes sense as to why they all go to Molly's together and that kind of thing. And also in the first episode of Med, Herman comes in and gives a box of like personal belongings of patients to Maggie, and it's like established through their conversation that they've been friends for a while, which makes sense. You know, Maggie's been working there for years and years and years by the start of the show, and Herman's been a firefighter for God knows how long, so it makes sense that they, you know each other and be pretty close friends. But I do think Med had kind of had to try harder to ingrain itself in the One Chicago universe. Like, Will and April helped. I think without Will and April being introduced earlier, Med probably wouldn't have lasted as long as it has. But I think in the first few episodes they really did have to try and like be like, okay, these characters do all know each other and we are establishing this now. Also, I'm currently rewatching One Chicago, which is why I'm remembering all this. And like, I completely forgot about this until I was watching it, but there's like a brief thing at the end of like season 2 of Med when Natalie and Jay have like a brief thing, and I cannot think of two less compatible people. Like, it just doesn't make sense in my head. Because like, you're watching this episode of Med where like Jay and Will are talking about Jay potentially going on a date with Natalie, and then you watch PD and Jay is completely hung up on Erin even though they're broken up. Like, he's about to propose to her even though they're not together. In that moment, I feel like the writers just needed to talk to each other a bit more and maybe be like, let's not do one of these storylines, most likely the Jay and Nat one. That was weird. But apart from that, I can't think of anything else where the shows kind of contradict each other, apart from obviously Will's backstory, which I've gone into. But like, apart from that, Med did a pretty good job of putting itself firmly in the One Chicago universe, unlike Chicago Justice. Now, I will hold my hands up right now. I have never seen Chicago Justice. Look, it's nowhere on streaming for free in the UK. You have to buy it, and I am not buying that show. It only lasted one season, and I'm pretty sure that was for a reason. Like, I know the One Chicago universe is in the same universe as like Law and Order, and I get that's probably where they were coming from for Chicago Justice, because from what I know of Law and Order, I also haven't seen Law and Order, sorry, they do have like courtroom scenes and episodes where they talk to like the DA and that kind of thing. But I think the fact that they took Antonio off of PD and put him on Chicago Justice tells you a lot about the show. Like, I think at the time, without Antonio being there, not many people would have watched it. No one needed a fourth Chicago show to watch. And obviously it only lasted like 13 episodes or something, I believe. And would I like to see it? Yeah, potentially one day. Do I really care that much? No, I don't like need to see it. I have no doubt it's probably got great writing and it's got great characters. Just if a show only lasts one season, that tells me it's probably not very good. In my head, like Fire, Med and PD, they can have crossovers between the three of them very easily. But Justice, that can only really cross over with PD and maybe Fire. Most likely not Med, which is probably why it struggled a bit. Obviously, I've never seen it, so I'm just guessing here. But I think that shows that even the same universe can have good spin-offs and bad spin-offs. And like, nowadays, you wouldn't call Chicago PD or Chicago Med a spin-off. They're like standalone shows in their own right. You could watch the entirety of Chicago Med and probably not be confused, save for maybe 1 or 2 episodes, which I think shows how just a spin-off can stand on its own 2 feet, even if it is so connected with the original show. But most shows, when they do spin-offs, don't really do that. Most shows, they do a completely separate spin-off, usually with kind of the same premise, but with completely different characters. And like, making the show completely standalone can be good, but it can also be really bad. And I'm going to talk about one show here which I think falls a bit into the bad category, and that's 911. Now, I hope you all know, if you've watched other videos on my channel, I love 911 so much. 911 is probably my favourite show that is airing right now. I cannot wait for season 8B. I'm so excited. Side note for any 911 fanfic readers, I finally read Ice Cream Before Dinner today. Oh my god. I was sobbing at that fic, okay? Usually, if a fic makes me sad, I might cry a little bit, but no sobbing. But ice cream before dinner? That wrecked me. But anyway, quite famously, 911 has a spin-off called 911 Lone Star, and they're not super connected. It's established that the shows take place in the same universe. However, the shows take place in completely different areas of the country. And yes, they essentially have the same premise, but Lone Star is way less of an ensemble cast than the original 911 is. In the original 911, there is no like sole main character. They're all main characters and they all have plot lines and screen time and very, very, very angsty character development arcs. Whereas in Lone Star, Owen Strand is the main character, and I don't think anyone can argue any differently. Now, I'm gonna let you into a little secret here. I watched Lone Star first. I know it's a crime. I got recommended Lone Star, and then I found out after I watched Lone Star that there was a 911 original version, and then I watched that and I preferred that, okay? It's just the way it happened, okay? Don't blame me, please. But Lone Star, as much as like I do appreciate it, I don't really care about Owen that much. The younger characters to me are much more interesting, and I get what they're trying to do with Owen. They were trying to make him like the new Bobby, but I think they tried too hard. It kind of falls into this realm of spin-off shows where they were trying to make it similar to the original show, but also different at the same time, and somehow alienated their entire fan base because of that. Especially this like final season. I'm only on like episode 9, by the way, because that's the latest one that came out in the UK. But like, Grace is gone. And Grace was my favourite character, so that's really depressing. And like, I'm trying to get into Carlos's storyline, but I just don't really care. I've never super cared about like the police plot lines in either 911 show, but I'm really struggling to deal with Carlos right now. Like, spoilers by the way, but he's just found the guy who killed his dad, and now I'm like, where do we go from here? I didn't really care about much about like finding out this mystery, but where do we go from here? I do like Tommy though. I do much prefer Tommy to Michelle Blake, who was there, I think, for just the first season, might be the first 2 seasons. Tommy Vega though, absolutely love her. She's hilarious. And her husband dying, that was criminal. She didn't deserve that. She'd barely been on the show, and then her husband dies. It was a lot. And then there's Mateo and Nancy, and like, I do like them together. I think they're kind of cute, but I just don't really care too much. I did like how they established why the actor who plays Mateo was on the original 911. That was hilarious. I thought that was very funny. Love that. And then there's 3 characters left, which is Judd, Paul, and Marjan, who I'm not sure I'm pronouncing her name right, but I'm trying my best, okay? This is the problem when you watch American shows. You don't know how to pronounce their names in a British accent, okay? I'm just trying my best. I'm really sorry if I offend anyone. With Judd, I liked his storyline in season 1. Like, he was the only one left from the original firehouse. He was like dealing with all this like PTSD and trauma. He didn't want new people around. I liked his storyline in season 1 and how he's kind of grown over the seasons. Paul, as far as I can remember, hasn't had any like massive storylines. I'm probably forgetting something knowing me, but if he has had like a major plotline, it hasn't been like memorable enough to stick in my brain, you know? And then Marjan, she had that season where she was just like doing other stuff, and I was like, I don't really care. I just prefer to see her at the firehouse. I'm sorry. But I just think because Owen Strand gets so much screen time and so many of the good plot lines and that kind of thing, the other characters kind of fade into the background a lot. And I did like the crossover. I really do love the crossover with the original 911. Well, I liked it more if all the characters from 911 were there, but like, I get they were probably busy or something, I don't know. And I did also like how when Owen and Hen were like stuck in that tunnel, he was like hallucinating the dead paramedic. I did like that like tie-in to the other plot lines going on Lone Star, because sometimes with like any show when they do crossovers, you can kind of feel like the ongoing plot lines are just shoved to the side for those 2 episodes, and then they bring them back once the crossover's done. So I did really enjoy how they did that with the 911 crossover, but still Lone Star just isn't the same as the original 911. They tried too hard to have a main character and it didn't work out for them. And now obviously Lone Star is on its final season, and I'm not really that shocked. I think the writing was on the wall when the original 911 moved over to ABC, because when you have 2 shows set in the same universe on different networks, it doesn't really look good. And honestly, I would much rather have 911 than Lone Star, so I'm not too mad about it. And then also when 911 went over to ABC, the storylines, the writing, it just got quite a lot better. And they like gave us stuff that we've been asking for years, so like no one's going to complain about that. Whereas with Lone Star, since like the beginning, everyone's been saying Owen Strand is too much of a main character, and then it's just been like same old ever since the start of the show. I mean, I will miss it a bit when it ends, but also I don't think I wanted it to go on anymore. Like, the plot lines would have gotten too convoluted eventually. Like, what trauma hasn't Owen gone through at this point? Let's be real here. But anyway, my next show I want to talk about is Grey's Anatomy. Now, Grey's Anatomy has had 2 TV spin-offs. There's also the B-Team YouTube spin-off, but I'm not not going to count that for this, okay? Now, the first spin-off was Private Practice, and that was very much established in the final 2 episodes of season 3. Addison goes to LA, she sees her friends there, we meet all of the characters from Private Practice, and then she moves over to that show and it becomes Addison's spin-off. But it's very much in kind of the same way that Meredith Grey is technically the main character on Grey's Anatomy, but everyone really has like big plot lines and that kind of thing. That's the same kind of way Addison is the main character of Private Practice. And Private Practice, they weren't trying too hard to be just Grey's Anatomy in a different location. It's a completely different show. Like, they're talking about a small practice with doctors. They only go to the hospital for like serious cases. There's not much surgery going on, and if there is, it's usually some kind of C-section. And I liked how they did crossover episodes that didn't feel too kind of forced, if you know what I mean. Like, yeah, Addison's brother has something wrong with his brain. Of course she's going to go to who she knows to be the best neurosurgeon in the country, Derek. And then later in the show, I think it's season 5 or 6, they take Mason's mother, who I forget the name of, to Seattle to have brain surgery. Because obviously, again, Addison knows the best brain surgeon is Derek, and he is in Seattle. Unlike Mark comes to LA for a couple of episodes with his daughter Sloane, who is pregnant and needs surgery. And I believe, I need to fact check this, but I believe in season 6 there is a moment where Addison acknowledges Mark's death. It feels right that she does, but obviously if you don't watch Grey's Anatomy, you wouldn't know. And then there's that one episode of, I can't remember if it's on Grey's Anatomy or Private Practice, but Bailey's in it, and she's like flirting with Sam Bennett. I love that so much. I think Private Practice was good until the final season. The final season kind of ruined it for me. Like, first of all, I know this isn't season 6, but Del dying feels like a very Grey's Anatomy move. Like, you know, kill off a main character. They love to do that on Grey's Anatomy. As much as I hate them for it, it was very emotional, so it probably did what it was intended to do. By the way, massive spoilers for season 6 of Private Practice in the next bit, by the way, so just like skip this bit if you don't want Private Practice spoilers. But then like they kill off Pete as well, which feels like a lot. Like, I didn't think they were going to kill off Pete as well as Del. I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, he's dead? Okay, I thought they were going to somehow save him, but sure, he's dead now. And then like at the end of the show, when it's revealed the entire show was just Violet's book, that felt very odd. It felt very forced, very like, let's come to a conclusion. It's the kind of thing I would have put at the end of like a creative writing piece I did at school when I was like 7. Like, when you know when you put at the end and it was all a dream, it kind of feels like that, okay? Like, it just feels like season 6 is kind of a hodgepodge of half-finished storylines. Like, Naomi just has a lot of stuff going on, and I feel like if they'd had like a full-length season for season 6, she could have got a lot of that resolved, but you know, we live and we learn. It was nice though that Addison's final conclusion was like she's happy she's got a child. Like, that is what she set out to do at the start of the show, so that feels like a good ending for her. And she deserved that after being, you know, on Grey's Anatomy for 3 years and then getting her own spin-off. She was the longest standing character and she deserved to have like a good ending. So I would say Private Practice mostly is a good spin-off. Season 6 is questionable, but the rest of it's very, very good. Now, the other Grey's Anatomy spin-off is Station 19. Station 19 ran for 1 more season than Private Practice did. It got 7 seasons, and it only finished relatively recently, so it feels weird to be talking about it in the past tense still. But I do think it was very good. It was much more intertwined with Grey's Anatomy, because obviously it was in Seattle. They were dropping off patients at Grace Sloan all the time, you know? And do I love how they plucked Ben out and shoved him onto Station 19? Not particularly. Like, if you're gonna pick a character, at least pick one that hasn't already had a career change. Like, come on. But I did really enjoy Station 19. I would have liked to see more of the characters, you know, happy. Cough cough, Dean Miller. He deserved a happy ending rather than to die, okay? But most of the characters in that final episode, you do look into like their future and you see them happy, which is actually really, really nice. Although I do kind of feel like Jack never really got his happy ending. Like, he was just kind of kicked out of the fire department and then he just kind of did stuff and hung around for the rest of season 7. And then he was happy at the end, so yay! I would have liked to have seen them do more with his character in season 7, but I get like they only had so much time and so many episodes and they had to wrap up everyone's storyline before the end of the season, you know, I get it. And as much as like I can criticise Station 19, it is in my world a very good spin-off. Rankings wise, it's probably just below Private Practice purely because I just love the characters of Private Practice a little bit more. But it is still a very good spin-off. It's not by any means bad. So if you want to keep track of my rankings, by the way, One Chicago's at the top, all 3 shows, then Private Practice, then Station 19, and then 911 Lone Star. And now we're going to talk about my final spin-off shows that in my world are the worst. And these are so bad that I don't think I've watched them through more than once. I might have watched one of them through a second time, but if I have, it's a very long time ago. And by very long time, I mean probably like 3 to 4 years, because I do not remember what happens in either of these. I am, of course, talking about the iconic Criminal Minds spin-offs of Beyond Borders and Suspect Behavior. Suspect Behavior came first. Obviously, there is that introduction episode in, I believe, season 6, I want to say, of Criminal Minds. Suspect Behavior only lasted 1 season, which I still think was a lot for what the show was. Like, I get what they were trying to do. They were trying to replicate the original Criminal Minds, but with new characters. And obviously they're seen as this, like, red cell rapid response team. So they're, like, kind of operating more outside the rules. There's less bureaucracy than there is in the original Criminal Minds. And I do very much enjoy the original backdoor pilot with Criminal Minds. I think that's a great episode. I just think they try too hard to literally replicate each character from Criminal Minds one for one. Like, obviously they're not perfect recreations, but I do think they try to have a lot of the characters have the same personality traits as the OG characters. Like, you have the leader, who I believe his name is Sam Cooper, I want to say. Anyway, like, in my head, he's like a mix between Hotch, Rossi, and Gideon, like, all smushed together. And then there's, like, the prophet guy who was in prison. He's like the Spencer Reid in my world, except he does it with, like, computers, so he's kind of like Spencer and Penelope Garcia mixed together. And then there's the British guy, who I always forget the name of, but he, like, flirts with Emily in the crossover episode. He's, like, the Morgan of the team, I feel. And then there's, like, a girl, I forget her name, she's, like, blonde, and she's, like, the Emily / JJ mix of the team. And then I believe, for, like, the actual show, they added another character that isn't in the original backdoor pilot, but I forget her completely. I do not know her name. Can't remember what she looks like. And also Garcia occasionally appears in Suspect Behavior as well. And that's just because I feel like it's very easy to insert a scene with Garcia into, like, any episode, because they can just film her in her office and then edit it together to look like a phone call. She doesn't actually have to be in the same place as any of the other members of the cast, which is probably why she's the only one who crosses over. But as far as I can remember from the, I think, one time I did watch Suspect Behavior, there wasn't, like, anything that was massively standout. Like, it was alright, but it wasn't any, like, Criminal Minds. It wasn't to the level of Criminal Minds. So that got cancelled after 1 season, and then a few seasons later they decided they wanted to try again with another spin-off, and that was Criminal Minds Beyond Borders. Now, Beyond Borders did do a bit better than Suspect Behavior. Beyond Borders lasted 2 seasons. Yay! I believe one character from Beyond Borders then came onto the actual show, but I haven't watched that far into Criminal Minds for a very long time, and I haven't watched Beyond Borders in even longer, so don't quote me on that. There is a backdoor pilot for Beyond Borders as well, which, you know, makes sense. And I do like the concept of Beyond Borders, you know, it's like OG Criminal Minds but international. I just kind of think the characters weren't super memorable. Like, I do not remember a single character from that show, which I think says a lot about it. I do remember that I think they had, like, a pretty cool plane that they went everywhere on, but that's literally it. Because I feel like, yet again, they probably tried too hard to give these new characters personalities of old characters. Like, they weren't giving us anything new. They were just kind of the same characters repeated. And as much as I like the concept, I just don't think it was executed at all well. Like, from what I remember of the show, there were quite a lot of racist undertones, which I think says all you need to know about it. And again, with the characters, I feel like they were trying too hard to give us the same personalities with new people, like, yet again, even though that went so well for them last time. Like, you've got the smart one and the one who's like Morgan and kicks down all the doors, and then you've got the leader and yada yada yada, you got the technical analyst and all that. The only, like, difference they had was they had, like, a resident medical examiner, which was, like, kind of cool, but also that was it. Otherwise, it was just normal Criminal Minds, international. That was it. I think with some more thought and planning and kind of better writing and less racism, Beyond Borders could have been kind of good, but obviously it never got that opportunity and was cancelled after 2 seasons, so, you know. So if you want my full ranking, the best spin-offs I've ever watched are the One Chicago franchise, which basically aren't spin-offs anymore, but they kind of are, you know what I mean. Closely followed by Private Practice and Station 19 just under that. Lone Star's kind of, like, in the middle, but on the lower end, you know what I mean. And then right at the bottom, you've got Suspect Behavior and Beyond Borders. I can't say one of those is better than the other. They're both as bad as each other. They're both just not good. I think the aim for spin-off shows should be like the One Chicago universe, where the spin-off show stands on its own 2 feet, and, like, you don't have to start watching from the very beginning of the first show to understand where the spin-off show's at, that kind of thing. Because even with Private Practice, now I will confess I was not watching Private Practice at the time it was airing. I was a child, but I feel like a lot of Private Practice fans would have originally been Grey's Anatomy fans, and they've just started watching it because, you know, it's a spin-off. But Private Practice and Station 19, and even Lone Star to an extent, do try and, like, market their shows to people that didn't watch the original. Just, I feel like One Chicago did it way better, because now that you just have, like, 3 standalone shows that cross over sometimes, you know what I mean? Private Practice and Station 19 are over. Lone Star's finishing in like the next few weeks. None of them outlived the original show just because it wasn't done as well as the original show was. But like with Station 19, I prefer it to still be ongoing, but I get like they cancelled it, there's nothing I can do. I don't understand why they cancelled it. I mean, I kind of do. I know they were probably like running out of money for it, and it definitely was never as popular as Grey's Anatomy was, which is just this like giant. And I presume that's also what happened with Private Practice, because they ended at kind of the same point. But I still feel like those shows could have been ongoing and could have outlived their original show if they had had the money for it, and obviously also the big fan base that Grey's Anatomy has. Lone Star was always going to die. Like, I know Fox seemed to love Lone Star more than the original 911, which I think is stupid, by the way, but as soon as the original 911 moved to ABC, Lone Star was dying. Like, people weren't going to watch Lone Star anymore. I was really only watching it in case there was another crossover happening, and when that was like said not to be a thing, I was kind of just like, well, I guess I'm watching till the end of the show because this show is ending soon. And I was right, so, you know, I guess I knew it. And then the Criminal Minds shows were just awful. Those really needed some more time in the oven. I'm going to be honest with you here, they were so bad. But now it's getting really dark in here all of a sudden, so I should finish this video. If you have a favourite spin-off show out of the ones I've talked about here today, leave it in the comments down below. And while you're down there, maybe like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Maybe? We recently hit 40 subscribers, which is literally crazy.
So since filming this video, we've actually hit 50 subscribers, which is even more insane than 40, but just take everything I say here and apply it to 50 subscribers, okay?
I know this might seem stupid to a lot of you because 40 is a very small number compared to like big YouTube channels, but for me this is a massive deal. I want to thank you all so much. Thank you for watching my content, thank you for enjoying my content, thank you for subscribing. I have so much fun making these videos and I really hope that comes across and that you enjoy them as much as I like making them. Also, you may have noticed I've started posting my TikToks on here as shorts. Originally that was going to be for the TikTok ban, which lasted, what, 14 hours was it? But then a bunch of new people found me through those shorts, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to keep posting them on here. So if you see those, that's what that is. Also, sorry this video is a bit late. I went back to uni after Christmas and got super busy, but hopefully these videos should be coming out at a 2 weekly basis again, hopefully. If you want any updates, check my Twitter, that's at thisisclauds, or my community tab on here. And while I'm talking about Twitter, if you want to follow me anywhere else, I'm at thisisclauds on Blue Sky, Twitter and TikTok. You can find me on all those platforms. And I post fanfiction TikToks basically every single day, so you might find something you enjoy over there. So yeah, I've been Claudia, I hope you enjoyed the video and I'll hopefully see you all soon. Bye!